Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com. Today we're going to be starting our coverage on the 2014 Rapid World Chess Championships and the Blitz Championships as well. If you're not too familiar with the format and the tournament itself, I'll kind of break it down for you. On Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, they play the Rapid Championships. They play 5 matches a day. Each of those matches is 15 minutes plus 10 seconds per move. So if you move very, very quickly, you actually increase your time. You'll have more than 15 minutes. On Thursday and Friday, they play about 10 matches a day, and that's going to be in the Blitz format. So you're going to be looking at about 3 minutes per game per player, and they do get a 10-second additional time advantage for each move that they make. So again, if you move very, very quickly, it keeps you from losing all of your time. So again, there's going to be a lot of matches per day. I'm going to try to take some that I think are interesting, some of the bigger names in the tournament that you may be familiar with. And so in the first match today, we're going to be looking at, this is from round 1. White's going to be played by Eduardo Bonelli. He's a grandmaster from Venezuela. Definitely a very, very strong player. Really likes the English opening, and I don't cover many games with the English opening, so I thought it'd be pretty cool to show him. And he's playing my favorite player in this particular tournament, Nakamura from the United States of America. My kind of dark horse to win the tournament. Very, very accomplished, fast chess player, so I think he's going to do very, very well in this tournament. So we'll go ahead and get started. White starts out with knight to f3, pawn to d5, and then pawn to c4. Again, this is the English opening that we kind of talked about. Then black decides to decline this pawn right here, so he plays pawn here to c6, pawn here to e3, knight f6, knight c3. Simple development move from both sides, nothing too crazy. Pawn a6, queen here to c2. It's really interesting to see different players, but usually no one's going to get too crazy early on, especially in round 1. We have so many rounds. They have 15 rounds they're going to be playing, so no reason to get too crazy right away. Pawn here to g6, getting ready to fianchetto on the king side, and then castle. Pawn here to d4, very similar to kind of a queen's gambit, playing pawn here to d4, and then queen here, or pawn here to c4. Bishop here to g7, pawn to b3. The pawn takes right here on c4, and white has a few different options. Myself, I would have taken with my bishop here on c4. Nice little outpost for this bishop, although it could be kicked off right away. But it is attacking this square here on f7. Very easy to play. In the particular game, Bonelli decided to go ahead and take with his pawn here on c4, which is fine if you do this. You are going to be playing this rook here to b1. Semi-open file on the b file right here, so that's going to be kind of his game plan, and that's fine as well. Both sides I think are pretty equal. Pawn here to c5. Instead of taking, white decides to go ahead and push forward with d5, and I really like this because this does gain some space, especially in any chess game. Space is very important, but especially in a rapid or a blitz game, as your opponent is strapped on time, and really people just make a lot of mistakes. Even at the highest level, they make mistakes. If you can kind of squeeze them, not give them a ton of space, a lot of times they'll crumble under that. And so again, this d5 move makes a lot of sense from white compared to exchanging pawns off material, giving up this d file. There's just no reason for white to do that right now. Pawn here to b5, a great move from Nakamura. This is kind of the best way to kind of chip away at the defense. This pawn here on c4 is kind of defending this, and this immediately counterattacks that on the queen side of the board. Bishop here to b2, opening up the door when this knight moves to kind of control and attack this long diagonal right here. Castle on the king side, and then pawn takes on b5, and then we have the retake right here. And then white has a few options. He picked the right choice, and that is taking with his bishop here on b5. But it's interesting how some of the top players in the world play, because it would be very, very easy for you to look at this and say, okay, I'll go ahead and take with my knight right here. It's completely fine. It really doesn't matter too much if I take with my bishop or my knight. Both ways I have protection from the other minor piece, but the game is very, very different in this particular case. Now the bishop can come here to f5, attacking this queen. Once the queen moves, all of a sudden black has 2 attackers on the square here on d5, so the queen can come here to b3. The knight takes here on d5. All of a sudden this is not looking as good for white. He's kind of lost control of the center of the board. Black has a very active center. He does have his bishop now right here on f5. attacking the center with both of his bishops. If we compare this, just to again go back in this board state, with the bishop taking here on b5, the bishop can't just come down here to b5 anymore, or to f5. All of a sudden, white can kind of block it with this pawn here to e4. He has his knight protecting it, his queen protecting it. All of a sudden, this is no longer a good move for black. So this small little difference in this move, also this knight is now protecting this pawn here on d5 as well. So although it looks about the same, since both minor pieces are protecting this bishop taking here on b5 is a much better play. And it's always fun to watch these high level plays being made with such little time for them to think. Black now plays knight to a6, and then we see castling on the king side. I really like in this position pawn to e4. I think it's just a lot stronger, solidifies the center of the board. He does need some protection on the square on d5. He can always castle later, doesn't have to castle right away. I think it was just a little bit stronger than castling on the king side. Once he does, Nakamura immediately plays knight here to b4, and he has a lot of attackers. He has both of his knights, he has his queen attacking this square here on d5, so it's going to be very, very difficult for Eduardo to kind of hold on to this pawn on d5. Decides to go ahead and swing his queen over here to e2. Doesn't want it, again, it's being attacked right now by this knight, so definitely wants to get it out of there. The knight immediately takes here on d5, gobbling up some of that material. It doesn't really have to worry too much about the center of the board right now, so that's definitely going to be a good thing for black. As far as we look at it, we now see the rook swing over here to d1, trying to control this long open file. The knight's going to take. We're going to have an exchange right here. Very interesting. Both sides have their bishop pair on board, so it's an open board state, meaning there's not a lot of pawns clogging up the center of the board, so this is going to be good for bishops. Just come to keep in mind. The queen's going to move. Again, is being attacked by this rook right here. Pawn here to a4. Anytime you have passed pawns, they're really meant to be pushed, especially it's on the edge over here. This is going to be a great place to kind of start to push, because it's very hard for your opponent to control the center of the board and really focus on these pawns on the outlier. If you have a pawn here on c5, it's a little bit easier for your opponent to control the center of the board and just keep an eye on this square, in this particular case, the pawn here on c5. Now the bishop to b7, controlling this long diagonal right here. And then a few different options from white. You know, again, if we kind of look at it, both sides have a pretty even game. White maybe have a small advantage, but not too much. A few things he could do. You know, Bonelli could try pushing forward with a5. This makes sense. He does have both his bishop and his rook protecting it, so passed pawns are meant to be pushed. He could try h3, potentially keeping this knight coming here to g4, although it would be difficult for this knight to do a whole heck of a lot. You could always play queen here to b2. That's definitely an option, lining up this barrel right here to attack and control this long file. He chose another option, which, you know, seems fine as well, I guess. The rook swinging over here to c1, giving a little bit more reinforcement. Also, if this bishop moves, he'll be able to control this c file right here. Nakamura decides to bring his own rook over here to c8, which makes sense. Queen here to c4, kind of lining up on this pawn right here. Also attacking the square on f7, which again is still a weakness, as it's the only square right now being protected by the king. Then we have the bishop take on f3. Definitely an interesting move, I thought, from Nakamura as I saw this. Giving your opponent the bishop pair and losing the bishop pair for yourself is kind of weird, again, especially in an open game like this. The pawn's going to recapture. Yes, it does give his opponent a, you know, doubled pawns here on the f file, but giving them a double bishop pair is definitely just difficult to deal with. So not sure I would have done that, but again, Nakamura is a much stronger player than me. So in the heat of the moment, we'll go ahead and say it's not the worst thing ever. Pawn here to e6, bishop here to a d4. Nice little move, knowing that the pawn cannot take this bishop. The queen would go down, and then black would definitely lose the exchange of material right here. So nice little move from white. Knight's coming in here to d5. And then the queen's just going to take here on c5, getting some material advantage in the game. If we kind of look at it, white has 5 pawns of material, black has 4, although white does again have the double pawns. but white also has the double bishop pair in the open game. So white has a small advantage, but not huge advantage on board. Queen back here to d8, and then we have the queen come back here to a3. Queen here to g5, getting involved into the action again. This king is a little bit unsafe because this pawn is recaptured here on f3. So then we have the king come back here to h1. Again, we're going to kind of do a little dance over here. The bishop comes back for a discovered attack if he wants it. Now the bishop's going to come up here to f8, attacking this queen here on a3. The rook's going to swing up here to c8, and then after the rook recaptures, both sides trying to gain some ground, but no one really has a clear advantage on board. White eventually will look to push his pawn up on the a file, but it's not clear how he's going to gain a huge advantage to actually be able to do that. Now we have the queen come down here to h4. Now the king's going to come up here to a g2, again attacking the king. The king comes back. We're going to do a few moves. Very interesting in that particular game. If we come back to this particular case, we already have a twofold repetition. If you repeat the same moves for 3 times, it's actually a draw. Now, if you look at Eduardo's position, his first match, big tournament, he's playing Nakamura, one of the top 10 players in the world, definitely one of the top rapid chess players in the world. He can pretty much just take a draw here. But he said, you know what, I'm the white pieces. It's about even right now, but I'm going to go for the win. And instead of taking the threefold repetition, decided to go ahead and play bishop here to a6, saying, no draw for me, I want to play out. Could definitely cost him, as, again, I think Nakamura is just a much better player than him, but valiant effort on his part to go ahead and try to play for the win. We now see black bring his bishop to d6, so Nakamura looking for the quick checkmate here on h2. Although it is a rapid game, you usually don't see a grandmaster actually fall for something like this. I think pawn to f4 is just the easiest and cleanest way to go about blocking this. I can't really find a lot of ways that this goes bad for whites. In the game, though, decides to play king here to g2, which I think is pretty weak, kind of opens up the door for Nakamura. He's just building up a lot of his presence on the king side, and the king coming up more closer to the queen just seems a little odd to me, but the queen's going to come down, capture here on h2. Now the king comes back here to f1. Rook swinging over here to b8. Bishop here to b5. Nice little outpost. It's going to be very difficult for black to do a whole heck of a lot here with this bishop and this pawn here, but that's completely fine. He's going to start forcing the action on the king side. He does have now this pass pawn on h5. He can start to push it down his opponent's throat. He does have a very active queen, so it's going to be very difficult for white to have too much safety going on. We now see king here to e2. Nice little bubble. He still has to worry a little bit, but not right now. King here to g2. Bishop here to h8, getting ready for a checkmate potentially with queen here to g7, so something that black has to deal with. He plays bishop here to f8. It's good and bad. Yes, that kind of stops any immediate checkmate, but also you just don't want your bishop to have to play defense duty. And again, that was definitely one of the big pieces that Nakamura was kind of using to attack his opponent. All of a sudden, that's off the game, and black's attack doesn't look nearly as strong as it did before. Now, the bishop comes back here to e5. Rook swinging over here to a8. Interesting move. It's not doing too much. He could have also tried to bring his rook here to c8 and then down here to c5 and really solidified. Again, he does have his bishop on f8 kind of protecting that. So he could have just kind of locked down this entire thing right here. The rook swinging over here to a8, I think is a little bit passive. He now has defense duty with his bishop. He also has defense duty with his rook here on a8. So a very defensive-minded Nakamura right now going into the endgame of this chess game. Bishop here to c6, a very aggressive move from Eduardo, attacking both of these pieces after the rook comes down. White decides to go ahead and take after the pawn recaptures. A nice move here with queen here to b6. It's threatening a few things. First and foremost, the most important that Nakamura has to deal with is he's threatening the rook here on a5. That's kind of an obvious to everyone watching. But he's also threatening queen to f6. And then from here, queen here to h8 is going to be checkmate. So Nakamura really has to figure out how he can go about doing this. Now, he does have kind of an out here. He could always take with his rook here to a4, but then, you know, the queen's going to come over here, but that's fine because Nakamura can now bring his rook down here, check. The bishop's now going to come back. We can even exchange back here. Yes, black is kind of down a little bit in material, but again, he's only down as far as, you know, the rook and the bishop, but he does have an extra pawn. It's going to be very difficult, in my opinion, for Nakamura to lose this. Interesting move in the game. I'm not sure if Nakamura just didn't see the rook being attacked over here or just was really too concerned with this queen coming here to f6. But in the game, he played queen here to g5. Huge blunder, pretty much allowing his rook to go down very easily. Bishop coming here to f4, attacking the queen. The queen is forced to move, and then the rook falls here on a5. So from here, it's a pretty quick defeat. Again, we have two grandmasters, although Nakamura is much higher as far as a ranking. It doesn't matter who's playing this position. White's usually going to win because he's just up a massive amount of material. Nakamura makes you know, a run for it, trying to gobble up some material, but you know, Eduardo Bonelli still has more pieces on board. And again, it doesn't even matter if Nakamura tries to push on the king side. There's just no real hope here. White's okay exchanging the queens off the board. This would be fine for him as fast as he can get down all material on the board. It's going to be easy for him to win. We see a few last-ditch effort moves from both sides, but then eventually we just see the queen come back here to d3. There's no other moves for Nakamura to really do in this position. The bishop here on d6 kind of stops any momentum for this pawn here on the king side to push forward. And then Nakamura is just down too much material, so decides to go ahead and resign in this game. So kind of disappointing. My favorite to win the tournament goes down in round one. He has 14 rounds to make up for it, but definitely an interesting match for Eduardo Bonelli. Again, a great Venezuelan player, utilizing the English opening. He's very familiar with it, and in a rapid setting, he did extremely well. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this commentary, kind of enjoyed some fast chess compared to some of the longer games that we've been covering for a while here. Definitely make sure you check out on the website, thechesswebsite.com, for additional commentary on other games. And then again, every day I'll be having more games from both the Rapid and the Blitz Championships. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.